topic is very important this afternoon because that is the main purpose why we have the multicultural diversity subject. It's to understand how different cultures work, and sometimes some of these cultures can be a bit too strong or overwhelming to some cultures, which can create xenophobia. Now, for us to understand what xenophobia means, we have to know unsa jud ang iyang full context and how, although similar man sila sa racism, but unsa pa iyang difference, unsay distinct nga kalahian sa xenophobia and racism. Why both of them can be similar, but they are still different. Although it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. It's like mura siya og sige nang two different statements that doesn't go together. Like do ka statement gi-merge mo siya paradox. Paradox bang tawag ana. It may sound like a paradox because they're quite similar, but they're also different at the same time. Paradox, self-contradictory statement. It may sound as like a paradox, no? Pero before we use that's xenophobia, that's racism, you have to understand unsay kalayan ng duha. Dul-dul ra siya kay, of course, no? It's how we treat other people with different cultures, how we see them. But racism is more on an authoritarian kind of mindset, or kanang mo gawas ang ilahang pagka sa tawag na kanang na sa tumay sa kondila. So sorry. Nabad kay kong ulo no, I'm not able to think clearly. What they call this kanang inferiority. That's the term, no? Racism can come off as inferiority between those with whiter or lighter complexion with regards to people with darker complexion or with different culture. Well, xenophobia is more on not inferiority, but more on I'm afraid that if these people from this kind of country immigrate sa amuang nga country, it will overpower our culture and that can change our way of life. That's xenophobia. Mahadlok ka nga, like for example, you see that a lot in the US, wherein Americans are afraid that there are a lot of Chinatowns na or Mexicans that are working in households nga madlok sila nga daghan na kaayo ni ang mga tao no nga ma-overpower ang ilahang culture from sa foreigners, no? That's xenophobia. Fearing that your way of life will change because there's a lot of people from different cultures that are migrating to your place. So racism and xenophobia are quite very similar sila in a way because that's how we treat people with different culture, but they're different because the other one imposes inferiority while the other imposes more on ano siya? Fear sa foreigner, fear sa ilahang culture nga gidala, fear of that very strong culture. So that's what we are trying to learn right now this afternoon. Now I have to be very careful, no? Mark, ko alam ko sa inyo ha. Bit of warning. I am not an expert when it comes to this goes beyond social studies, no? Some universities gani, they have majors for this nga studihan jud na nila ang culture, like you have anthropology and then mag major pa jud ka sa multicultural nga ko ano. So I'm not an expert of our topic this afternoon. My expertise might be, or siguro ang ako ang ma-share niyo might be limited, but hopefully I may be able to explain some terms clearly to you, no? Because of course I have a very limited understanding pa of our topic this afternoon, and I have to be very careful because racism and xenophobia are very not too sensitive, but kanang very important topics that we have to understand. It's happening all around us. Siguro dili lang ta aware because we don't see it as it is. Like we're so used to being treated, or kung we're so used to treat others this way that we're not aware that we're already committing racism or we are already displaying xenophobia. So, ako lang is, of course, with the information that is handed to me and some videos that will also help you. Rest assured that the videos that I will be getting are from respectable sources, no? Kanang dili ra kuha gikan masking kinsa. Others are, I have one video, actually 3 videos nga ako ang ipakita ninyo. There is one video coming from, ano na siya class? A social experiment. Yeah, mga dark-skinned but they are European, so Italian children. So it's, some of you may already seen that one online, but it's a social experiment. Then the 2 other videos, so ang isa is more like TED Ed, not as, respectable as TED Ed, pero a combination of information about the difference in racism and xenophobia. And then the other video, ay katulo, is a video from different news sites wherein ang ilahang explanation about refugees in Ukraine na siya bahid nga racism. They're no racism because there is an inferiority complex. Dili siya xenophobia. Xenophobia is mahadlok man ka nga, like di ba kita ka online nga kanang mga Americans, we call them Karens, di ba? Kay kanang mga Karens daw kuno meron siya marites kung sa tuwa pa muning mga kusog mo reklamo sa manager, no, the typical very irate kind of citizen. Then makita siya mga Mexican employees or black Americans iyang iharas, niya nga you go back to where you came from, or kanang don't come here, and when you come here you have to speak English. That's xenophobia. Kay mahadlok man siya nga daghan na kay mga Mexicans mo migrate diri, daghan na kaayog mga daghan na kaayo og mga Asians or Black Americans nga matabunan na ang culture sa mga puti. Oh, that's xenophobia. Pero ang katong sa ka video ko ipakita nyo later class is more on racism because they see people differently para nila ang mga puti ra angay tabangan, things like that. No? Later on, you will see it for yourself, no? Okay? So let's try to go first with the definition of xenophobia and racism. Now, again, as what I've mentioned earlier, the information that I will be giving to you this afternoon might be limited. So if you want to conduct further readings, you can. Anyway, that's how I also adapted in college sa una, because I understand some of our teachers are not, because supposedly you have to get an anthropology teacher for this, given that, of course, we're a very small school, have limited resources. So I'm not an expert totally comes to this, but I'll do the best that I can to explain in simpler terms lang, no? Actually, I'm really quite interested with this one because when we talk about culture, usually that's qualitative studies, no? Kung mo dyan mo like you observe different culture groups. I'm planning to conduct a qualitative study, but I'm not a sociologist, no? Hopefully, I can find a way on how to conduct a qualitative study nga mo mix po siya with culture and tourism para mo align lang dyan siya sa ko ang major kay business manggod, no? Pero sige lang. Anyway, in the first place, so why are we talking about this? No, last time there was an explanation why we talked about feminism and masculinity. Diba? Remember, way back pa before we started discussing on gender equality, I told you that there are other countries and even other establishments that they have different corporate cultures. In their culture, they value female more or the male more. In their culture, high context siya, low context culture. Diba, like, Western countries are more on high context, low context ang Asian countries. Racism is also part of, how we understand different cultures in the workplace and how we can avoid this, and also xenophobia. Because class, ang ato ang nature sa ato ang work, no, we are bound to meet different kinds of guests, no. If dili mo magmaestra pars na ko, no, you're bound to work in an environment wherein you meet different people, and some of these people may not be from the same what they call this, like nationality or race, no? So you have to fully understand if what I'm doing now, is it racism, is it xenophobia, because the more you understand this issue, class, the more you're able to masking prevent lang or control nga, okay, I'm not gonna do this because it may look like or it may sound racist, or if I say this it might be offensive, etc., etc. Okay, so we're bound to meet different people, labi na guest, no? And importante na nga, okay, I don't have to feel superior kay it will come off as racist, no? Or I don't have to be afraid of this culture because it will come off as xenophobic. Okay? So, racism, if you are going to define it, is an Anglo-American discourse about the relationship between white society and people of color. Because of imperialism, class, no? Istoryahan naman siguro tamo ani ato pa jud sa una class nung, I don't know if that was last semester or this semester. I think it was last semester when we discussed about the history of Africa. Wherein, saan ba itong cellphone? Wherein, European countries were out there. They were making colonies out of different countries because they were thinking sila jud ang mga big superpower continents and countries back then. So they were out there exploring different pa jud nga mga places outside of Europe so that they can get not only resources and minerals, no, ang ila pud is moto either they make colonies out of them so that mo expand pa jud ang ilang empire. So of course, no, they during the course of time they've always seen themselves kasi sila jud ang inferior, sila ang advanced when it comes to this and that, sila ang educated and all. So that kind of superiority has been going on for years now, nga white people would think, regardless if it's an American or European, they would think nga sila ang superior race, and then the people of color are those in third world countries, poor, will not be in the same status as them. Sometime before gani class, no, if you see interracial couples, it's not an easy topic or an easy sight to see. Sa unang mura siya kanang taboo. So there was a little bit of that was racism at that time, no? It's how white people establish a relationship with people of color, how they treat them, no? Others they don't buy correct me. So it's more of kidnapping of people from their homes and then dadun nila dito sa United States to sell them as slaves. So people of color back then were treated as property, not just black Americans, even kita brown Asians, yung kag brown Asians class, dili lang nakitang mga Pinoy, mga Malaysians, kanang naa sa Middle East, no, kanang mga dili puti para sa mga Chinese ba, no? So mga brown Asians, Indians are Asians Indians, those in the Middle East, kita diri sa Philippines, Southeast Asia, we are brown Asians, so we are people of color, no? So we're always seen as below lang jud, no? So in France, it was also used as a more specific sense, wherein same as po, no, treatment of white society to people of color. So Lenton argues that it's relevant in Europe because of the historical tradition of colonialism. Now, colonialism wherein tuingon ako nga they go out there, they make colonies, they kidnap people of color, especially in Africa, and then they sell them as slaves. And then the Holocaust is an example as well, which was very common to Europe. And sadly, one of the videos that I will be showing to you this afternoon will be talking about how it's normal for people in the Middle East to have war and all, pero it's more of a violation of human rights kung Western na daw Western-like country like Ukraine ang maoy go war, murag dili daw kuno siya kuan. And then there was one correspondent that said nga it's very hypocritical or kuan pa siya kanang murag a slap in the face because in the very beginning kuan jud class ang pagsugod sa World War I and II are within European countries biya. No, the Holocaust is in kuan po Europe, no, and dira nagsugod ang racism in segregation of Jews, or if you are a person of color, no, you weren't given equal rights. Ang ideal gani nga kuan ni Hitler is muna he wanted to conduct a lot of experiments because his ideal kind of citizen sa Europe is blue eyes with blonde hair, white skin. So it became relevant in Europe because of that, no? Colonialism and Holocaust. Because it started there, no? So it takes new forms. It's not just about a relationship between white society and people of color. So appeal na po na siya relationship between insiders, including integrated minorities, and outsiders, like the new others and strangers such as asylum seekers. Dili lang siya between the white and people of color na. Racism can even apply, for example, if there are immigrants coming in, and then kamo nga gapuyo na dira, you don't want them there, kanang murag, you feel nga kanang you are superior, you don't share your resources to immigrants or foreigners, nga mo stay sa inyong country because exclusive rigid mo, because sila third world country sila or sila angay ko anan. That's also an example of racism. Okay? So, it's an idea that too many foreigners will cause unbalance. Okay? And of course, class ngano nahitabo man ni siya. Ngano there is an unbalance in culture, nga there are a lot of immigrants or people, going out from their ilahang country and then mo settle, mo look for jobs sa lain nga lugar. It's because, unequal nga paghatag sa mga resources. Other countries are thriving, other countries are struggling. So katong na sa makagawa silang country, they would always look for greener pastures to seek other opportunities sa lain nga country. And that would lead to them going to a different country with a different culture, nga mag-flock sila dito. No? You see Asians immigrate sa Europe and sa US, mga very big industrialized na countries because they provide countless opportunities, no? Even Americans sell this American dream nga, nga dito maasenso, or for example dito daghang mga opportunities. So that's why if a lot of countries have equal resources and opportunities in their own homes, there would be no cultural unbalance. Pero muna ning siya class, no, ning samot pa jud, ning masamot ka prominent ang racism karon because of course, no, unbalance of resources. People had to travel to a different place to work, to seek opportunities. So hadlok ang uban kay daghan kay foreigners maabot silang country. Even kita siguro, di ba, maglagot ta ba sa daghan kay kalabanan sa mga tag-iya na mga foreigners because kita galisod sa tong own country and then foreigners will have businesses here, no? That's an example of xenophobia nga kumadugayan ang atong culture kay makuan na sapawan na kay daghan na kay foreigners sa atong country, so mapud na, di ba? So that also increases as time progresses. So let's now proceed to xenophobia. Racism is more on how white society treat people of color. Xenophobia is more on the fear of strangers. Okay? Magdudul naman sila, ma'am, no? Like, how can you say it's different and the same at the same time? But xenophobia is more on katong, no? Mahadlok sila nga daghan maabot silang country, ma-overpower. Okay, for example, they've established this culture for a very long time, and you see, Westerners coming in baron, and then they've established camps here, they've taught us different things, influence our culture, nga nawala na itong mga karaan nga practices because a new one has emerged, kay daghan na kay mga foreigners kapuyo diri. An example of that is katong mga Espanyol, di ba? They have been for so many years class nga even our language, no? architecture, tanan, pati ang culture, nadala ra Japon ang food, tanan, music, etc. tanan. Nadala ra Japon na until karon. So, itong mga sinaunang nga tinuhuan, mga kuan, nawala siya, and then, more into Asian Hispanic na ang ninggawa sa ato ang culture. Mix of Hispanic na influence. So, mapuging no? Kay the more that there are a lot of foreigners staying in a place nga wala din sila dira gipanganak, nya they overpower the culture of that place, no? Ang mga mupuyo dito, they would feel fear. They would feel nga uncomfortable, no? They would get angry and all, and that is xenophobia. Oh, ma'am, isn't it a good thing to fight for our freedom, etc., etc.? Oh, that's a good thing. Ang pasabot ako xenophobia class is, for example, you see them just working there, no, wala man sila gaunsa niya. Ikaw kay kanang masuko na kagkalit, niya imo silang strip of their basic human rights, like you spit on them, call their names out, no, mention racial slurs, harass them. Puna siya. So why is there xenophobia? In-groups and out-groups, fundamental part of human society. It has to do with national identities being under threat or being formed. Economic competition could also be the case. Like what I've said earlier, no, nga daghan mag-opportunities mo na. You see a lot of races sa America kay hadlok man sila daghan magmagto sa America good. And some of them are not Americans, no? They're Asian, some of them are like Mexican, some of nila are from different, nationalities, different races. So, because you have to seek for better opportunities. Hindi ka naman dira sa America. So, that's why kakuan sila. Kung buto na ako, ng kanang America raba, or ang ilang mga inhabitants una, or kuan, ng mga Indians, how call that one? South Americans, mo ba na siya? Kanang kung lataw mo og kung lataw mo og kanang similar na ka Pocahontas ba, pero I don't know how to properly explain it. If you see like people like kung lataw mo og kanang Twilight, no, kanang mga kalahi ni Jacob, dili kay mga werewolf, mga kalahi ni Jacob ba nga kanang kuan, how you call this? I don't want to sound kuan. What's the proper way to say it? Okay, Indian Americans. Native Americans. Ay, okay, kaksak to de, sorry. Native Americans. I don't want to call them Indians because, like po ng Indians sa India. Yeah, sometimes man good in other countries, and calling someone Indian is an insult. So proper term there is Native Americans, no. So actually ang US before are inhabited by Native Americans, no. Nya kanang mga Americans yung nga puti makita ninyo class, they are from Europe. Nya nag-colonize, nangitar na sila part of land dira sa America. Muna, what you usually see now in America are white people, but there are Europeans. So, wait lang. Email. Okay. So, sorry na. I'm winning. Okay. So, mga siya class, no? Masuko ang mga Americans kay daghan na kayo mo migrate, no, mangitag opportunities abroad kay of course kita pod biatag ka lang greener pasture nga usay gani ang perfect rebuttal pa nila kay dili man gani na inyuha in the first place, no. In the first place you came from Europe and you started the European colonization and you came to America, no, and this land is first inhabited by Native Americans, which are kanang parsa ng kuan ba kana ganing like Sacagawea or kuan sa tawagan. Let me Google para you have an idea. Wala ning gawas. Loading kay ko ang kuan. Americans. Ito should ha. Okay. Then we'll go to pictures. Okay, so these are Native Americans. So sila jud ang nag-inhabit sa America, no, and then European started their European colonization, and that's why. So muna it's kind of hypocritical nga ang mga white Americans karon kay mag suko-suko dayon, and then in the first place they were not really the first inhabitants in America. Anyway, going back. Oh, sorry. Nakuanta. So muna economic competition, next is historical repression of particular groups, perceived threat to values and cultures. Now, like what I've mentioned, hadlok sila kay ilahang culture basin mailisan or ma-influence of another culture kay tong daghan na kaayog ning migrate sila ang lugar. Okay. Wait, I'll mute my microphone for a while. I have sakay ko ang kadali. Hello, so sorry. Paan lang nun went away from the computer for a while. Kaya ako confirm sa akong co-teacher. Okay. So next is inclusion, exclusion upon legal rules, systematic policies of the state, anti-foreigner populist political discourse. So, of course, one thing led to the other. An example of that class was when Trump started the kanang mag-build siya og wall because ang gang wars kuno gikan kuno sa Mexico, etc. Like, well, of course, support, which is partly true, pero not everyone from Mexico are like that, and they would like to go over the fence in hopes of establishing a better life tani sa Pikas. So muna mga anti-foreigner nga mga policies, not being open to refugees. Then construction of symbolic boundaries, like katoto ang nakita tong wall, build og wall, si Trump to of course palayo gikan sa mga foreigners nga mosulod sa country, most especially coming from Mexico. Fear of strangers, competition about welfare state. So those are just some few of the examples why xenophobia exists. They're afraid that these foreigners will take away their way of life, will overpower their culture. This will bring violence in their country nga dapat ani exclusive ra sa ilaha. So that is where xenophobia comes in. Okay? In inclusivity ra jud. Wala inclusivity di, sorry, exclusivity. Okay, so what is new about the new xenophobia or racism? So, new migration wave since 1989, fourth wave of uninvited foreigners not necessarily from former colonies. Like, for example, some of the European colonies are going to Europe, kay tungod, of course, in hopes nga tani, seek sila refuge. Pero, in the new wave of migration, even those who are not colonies or colonized, they are from Europe. Like for example, kita mga Filipinos, we were not colonized by Europeans, but others are still going to Europe, no, to seek for greener pasture. O globalization of migration. Okay? So they were able to move, no, more because there were other, you see an example there in Somalia. Sa una na sila mga civil war, no, or in the Middle East. So you see refugees seeking refuge in other countries, no. Uban magtuo personal pinaka-common jud ron is ang pinaka-recent di ay no. Pinaka-recent lang is ang sa Ukraine. Now, there are a lot of refugees now coming in. So there was a great wave of migration because of that, no, civil wars, disputes sa different countries. Can people have nowhere to go? So integration of EU with rising living standards associated of rise of new populist and anti-foreigner parties who are against refugees, no? Associated with threat of terrorism, Islamophobia. The reason why our brothers and sisters in like Iraq or Afghanistan, some of them are not allowed to enter into other countries because of Islamophobia. What is Islamophobia? Islamophobia, class, is the fear of people in, not just in hijab and nijab class ha, kanang mga Muslim. Even kita sa Philippines, we also have Islamophobia here. Mahadlo ka mo dool kay kuyaw kay gnaw, tabon tanan. Nya, mana din ka kana ganing kuan kay no kanang insensitive nga joke nga hala magdala ni siya og bomba. Nya kanang magkataw-katawa kay feeling nila cool kaayo sila. Sorry, that's female rage, no. Suko kay ko. That's female rage. But what I'm trying to tell you is Islamophobia is wrong, okay? Our Muslim brothers and sisters are people like us. Again, if we don't educate ourselves on the meaning behind everything, we take it as a joke because we're privileged, no? Privileged kay ta. We don't experience the same kind of thing that we experience, that others are experiencing. The fear nga ilang na-experience, ang ilahang mga injustices na experience nila class, are not being able to have like sanctuaries at different places just because of their race, no, just because they're Muslims, no. So ang Islamophobia is an example of that, wherein people are afraid to take in people from other like Middle East countries kay tungod hadlok sila nga terorista. I-associate din nimo nga basta Muslim siya, terorista din siya. I have one example. Actually, recently I just saw a video wherein she's a Muslim like fashion designer, and she was asked about, you know, what's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan because she's a Muslim person, and then some of the questions were more on like violence and like mura siya insinuating that this woman, she's a Muslim, she tolerates violence because it's part daw kuno of their belief. I was taught like that when I was young. That's why you know, when I teach students about other things, especially kanisha class, I debunk some of the knowledge that I've received from teachers na kung saba ka ayo ni saba mo kayo. Okay, so gidebunk na kung ubang mga things nga na-learn ako sa kong mga teachers nga, because I do not blame my teachers before class, no. Sa ilaha manggod nga time, very limited ra ang sources of information, and we're really quite lucky because we have the internet nowadays. It's easy to grasp information nowadays. Setback lang is mulagi, no, there's so much information. Some of them are false, some of them are true. It's hard to filter them out. So going back, no, katong babae Yung din associated nga because it's in their beliefs daw, ilang pag ilang tinuhuan, they have to be violent nga. I have to die because it's an honor, because it's part of teachings nila sa Islam, which is wrong. Dili na mao, no? Ipatuod ko na sa kong teacher class nga. Mobito na pakamatay sila, daghang terorista kay para daw kuno sa ilaha nga religion, if they die in war, they would go to heaven daw. That's wrong. Okay? Ang teaching sa Islam is full of love and respect, no? And I'm a Christian and I respect their religion, and we know nothing about the contents of there unless we study it, no? I had a friendly discourse with one of my students, si Lois, no, and she's studying Islam. She converted, and gikan jud sa iyaha, no, it's a religion full of love and just like in our Bible pod. And I respect that, no? And mulagi because of Islamophobia, Muslims are painted in a different kind of light. They're always painted in a negative light, negative way. Dira pa masulod mo ang no, kanang colonialist kind of thinking. Are you still here, everyone? No? Okay. Kapadian. Diri na masulod ang class, no? Colonialist kind of thinking. In movies, unsay makita nimo kanang mga war movies, ang permidayon mo labay og mga bomba sa kay mo na, no, kanang mga terorista, mga Muslim day naka-hijab, and that was already kanang na wired na siya sa tong utok bang hala kaya nang sa salida kung nakitaan kay kanang ang mga Muslim ing ana, no, without getting the full context nga very good nga dili man tanan Muslims like that, no. There are bad people, there are good people, so napoy bad Muslims, napoy good Muslims, dili man tanan good class, no. So you see movies, pieces of like kanang mga films, mga propagandas that just exudes Islamophobia. And if you try to understand why they wear this, why they look different, it's because it's in their beliefs, no, and not everyone is violent. Okay, dili man tanan violent, no. And debunk dyan ako na nga dili na tungod kay muna magpakamatay sila, suicide bomber kay part good silang religion. No, terrorism is simply just to strike fear sa mga tao. It's not a religion thing. No, because I have friends also from Mindanao State University. When we had our OJT sa Cebu, they're very friendly people, and when they talk about their religion, as in makakuan ko nga mas devoted pa man sila kaysa nako nga Kristiyano ko, and some of them really walk their talk, and ma-amaze po ko nila usahay. And I don't discriminate because just because we have different beliefs. Nakuan lang ko atol sa una kay tungod na offend ako kay di siya makag-pork niya. I was really young back then. I was really sensitive jud sa una, no, nga gi-base na ako na turn off ko niya as a friend because pero it's in their belief, diba? And then karon nga as I mature, the more understand even gani why they wear kanang clothing. I think I already told this one to you, no, nga murapod silag mga madre ba nga para nila if you reveal any part of your skin that is attractive, it may be sinful sa lalaki. So you cover that up para dili ka kakuan og no, like muna magtabon sila sa ilahang kanang hair, because hair is the crowning glory. It's beautiful. If pagawas yung book, no, the more ka gwapa lang taon, and even if puti kag skin, na mag-gloves jud ka, tabon jud ka from head to toe, because you don't want someone to have lustful thoughts about you kay tungod you're protecting your practice po sila chastity pod ba, no, ang mga ga-hijab og nijab. So it's a clothing, it's a sacred kind of clothing. It's self-preservation. They're doing it out of self-preservation. So, muna, no? So, you have to really sit down and understand. Na muna siya, associated with the threat of terrorism. Nga, it doesn't mean just because ay kuan mo gudi siya Muslim, so dapat tanan Muslims bati jud. Dili man ingana. So, that's also an example why xenophobia exists. No? People know so little that they judge so much. Okay? So, anti-racist xenophobic discourse of tolerance and human rights. and cultural racism replaced biological racism. So, unsa man ni siya, biological racism is, I don't want you around because of your skin color, your hair is different, your face is different. That's biological racism. Like, di ko ginahanin mo kay tungod ko, like, stay away from me kay itom ka, kuan ka. That's biological racism. Now, over the course of time, it was now replaced by cultural racism. It's not just about how you look, but also the culture that you bring. Like, I'm not comfortable with this person. Like, he talks so loud, or yung accent is different, or I don't like this person because ga chopsticks, use spoon, or ga speak siya in Mandarin. That's cultural racism. Okay, it's not just about how you look now, but how you act, how you talk, how you're different from others. Okay, tightening up of migration and asylum laws. Resistance of societies who do not see themselves as multicultural. So para nila, there's one dominant race ra jud, mga puti. Okay? And then xenophobia not expressed, so gypsies are seen as citizens of lower development. Apil na pud na no kanang dili ta mo daw tan nila uy kay mga nasa lower class countries. So, hatag og example on niya, no, adol ana. Okay nga. I don't see them as people nga tagaan og interest or tagaan og help because they are people in lower development places. In short, they are from poor places. They don't share the same equal rights as us. O mo pud na, no? Kuan kaayo, no? So racist, may inferiority complex. Okay? So who are the vulnerable groups in racism and xenophobia? You have immigrants, migrants in transit. Luoy kanila no kung maluoy ko na mga refugees no kanang they spend so many days just walking in hopes nga they would run away from their country nga daghagubot. Karon daghan kay mag-focus sa Ukraine no tinot man po no luoy jud kay they should be given help and support. Pero daghan po kay mga places pero in developing countries luoy kaayo class nga wala gitugunan og pansin just because they are not European-like or the people there are not with white skin, blue eyes, no? So, kung naluoy kaayo, yung uban, dagan din sila, no? Kanang mga refugees nga you see in the TV right now, it's not a new thing anymore. We've seen them countless of times. Okay? Naay uban nga, maluoy na lang jud ka class, no? Pero, limited ra nga, muhatag og pansin, ana. You see Al Jazeera. Sometimes I watch Al Jazeera, Al Jazeera, because, sometimes, yeah, Fox News can be very biased, but they provide okay naman po nga news, no? Dili mo ko kaingon nga muna I listen to what do you call this? Mga news outlets because even though some of them can be biased, again, it's up to your critical thinking to filter them out, but you don't have to reject them all your life. I'm going to this one because biased kayo mga news outlets. Pwede naman Japon ka. You just have to filter it out. Like in Fox News, no? Fox News can be sometimes biased because they're pro-Trump, etc. So what I did is I don't reject news Japan. I go to CNN or I go to BBC. I go to other news outlets where I can kanang enjoy listening to current updates. And then kanang mga topics class nga dili kay siya matugunan og pansin. Sometimes I go to Al Jazeera. Kay grabe Middle East ko ng mga issues ako nga grabe kay even ganing mga there was one time I had when I was a teacher in MIL, we had a discussion about journalism. Okay, I wanted to become a journalist when I was in high school, but this led me to another. Okay, so there were other countries that shut off completely jud ang mga news outlets, mass media. Why? Because they do not want to let the world know what is happening in their place. Nga there are injustices like total blackout jud class sa it's in the continent of Africa. I can't point my finger asa na kay last time I thought that was in 2018, 2017 ba to. And then nagapamatay sila mga journalists nga gaagto dito to see coverage. And kung good no news outlets are watchdogs of society. They provide us with information on what is happening in other places. It makes us feel connected. And muna, luoy kaayo kay pamatay sila no. Ang Al Jazeera dito kung ginagta na kay these parts were not covered. Dili dito siya covered class sa kuan sa mga dagko nga kuan. Dako po na Al Jazeera pero dili siya kuan dito sa mga like US nga mga kuan dili jud kay siya tugunan kay pansin. So mo nagalantaw ko na nila kay makita pa nimong good para sa tong dito sa asa to ha katong nagka gasoline outbreak sila kay ano ganito asa to nga lugar na limot na ko gano jud kaayo nya ang uban is they're using gasoline to fuel their kanang mga generator sumoto ang mga nasa hospitals kay they have to transfer asa to kung tito gapuyo gani nalimot na kasi to siya nga lugar sa Al Jazeera po ko to. So muna you see a lot of kaning mga issues like migrants in transit in Al Jazeera. Yeah, it breaks your heart because some of them mamatay sila class during the way like mo balhin sila magto sila sa Europe niya. Other countries do not accept them anymore kay daghan mga refugees and then wala na sila kaunusahay niya maglakaw ra na sila maglabang sa kuan sapa no and it breaks your heart because you don't have a place to sleep. They go to different places for security, for safety, because they just want to run away from their country nga puno og war. Okay, you have national minorities, foreigners and residents, refugees, asylum seekers. Okay, luoy kaayo. No, gypsies. So gypsies are nomads. Sometimes kuan pud sila class, they are also victims of racism because they're so odd. Like lahi ang ilang way of, they embrace nomad kind of life nya. Lahi ilang kuan lahi ilang way of living compared sa tuang we're so modernized, we've embraced Western culture. Sila kanang kuan na jud no kanang they travel. Usually you see like, when you think of gypsies kanang kanang ga-travel sa caravans na may uban nga gakon pero they're nomads no they don't want to own property like wala no kuan sila. And then muna kuan po sila class discriminate kay para nila mga low development ni sila or mga kwarta muna mga pobre like this na murag kuan sila i-degrade Muslims mana because of Islamophobia para sa tong estudyante pa ko no nya sus kung if I could just go back to that time mamuyag jud ko sa mga kauban ta ni ato no sayang kaayo tong kuan kay we went to Palawan and then there were girls nga they wore hijab and nijab so they were really covered from head to foot in black jud hijab and nijab so mata ra makita. That's intended for single Muslim women that are really devoted to their religion. Kung married na ka ang naong pwede ra mapakita dili kay dili gina first lagi diri sa mga Muslim sa San Carlos. Okay nanguntanan ko sa kung sa estudyante pod no nga nag senior high diri kuan man na may uban nga grabe jud ilang devotion nga mo jud na ilang i-follow ma'am ila jung like dedicated jud sila ilang tabunan tibok nilang lawas because they're so dedicated to the scripture okay sa ilahang nga kuan pagbasa sa Quran teachings nila dito so muna no nya mahadlok dayon na jud ko yung mga kauban nito kay nag-ARS si Congress mga ningdagan nya ako to kay ning lantaw ra ko I didn't understand why they have to wear that but of course no na dyan yung mga prejudice at first may dyan ka ay kakuan pod kakurat pod gaitom sila tanan no may anak jud ka no so karon I see people like that I don't kuan na no kanang di na ko mingon halakala kakuan oy kanang murag lain kay lang taon hadlok kay kuan wala na kay you understand na okay because they're so devoted to the teachings in their Quran or that's their way of self-preservation no they want to be because they're very conservative no di man nila gusto expose silang skin sa laing tao makita ra ilahang ko ano mother silang face and skin no? Or yung future mabana okay people of color kita mga people of color ta we are brown Asians no black Americans Africans, lahi po ng African sa Black American. Black American has deep roots in African culture. Pero they have lived in America na. Ang Africans are living in places like Timbuktu, South Africa, ano may anak class, no? So, si Africans, Black Americans, Brown Asians, kita Brown Asians ta, no? Even ka nang kung ano, sumugun ginlag mga yellow daw kuno kay may pagka-yellowish daw kuno color ang Asians like there are so kung ano kada ganing taas kay paglantaw ang mga puti sila kagalingon nga masking puti gani ang mga Chinese, ang mga Koreans or ang Japanese ila dya pong tawagon og yellows. Nya kung red imong skin kay Native American katong akong gipakita nga picture. Kung yellow kuan ka Asian. Nya alang paglantaw sa tanang Asian parihas ra no I'm not kuan like mo sa Chinese ka masking Korean ka no ana jud nga kind of racist kind of thinking. Nya kita brown Asians man ta class no. Kuyog ta sa mga Indians, Malaysians, Indonesians. So dili ta matawag nga yellows, tawag ta og kuan brown Asians. Nya muna no, discriminate based on kuan people of color and then ning kanang inyong makita class mo lain kay ma'am katong sugod sa pandemic dagan kay mga Filipinos ikuan. Ay dugay na jud na siya. Ever since before pa na siya nag-pandemic daghan na kaayo og mga kuano like xenophobic or racist kind of actions towards people of color labi na kitang Asians. Okay? And then, usually, they mga stereotypes gani sa mga tropes or stereotypes sa mga movies nga basta Asian ka, dili ka pwede ma-lead. Like, kung group of friends mo, sa una ha, magani karon kay ndut kay kata karon nga generation kay we have embraced diversity na nga we see people of color leading na in movies. Sa una ang sidekick ra jud is either Asian or kanang Black American. Ang bida jud per me kay mga puti, no? And you see kuan na no kanang mga people of color now as leading lady, leading man. So muna siya. These are vulnerable groups, no? And as you can see, you can't see any white people here because again, sila man ang supreme na kuan. So we should, change that kind of thinking because that is only intended for people who see themselves as one ang superior nga race. Okay? So, let's try to look at, I'm just going to share a video. Almost 4 na, no? Actually, extend ko class kay. Nubo na kitong discussion ron sa OM, history of OM tala, pinaka-last chapter 1. Taas kay yung chapter 1. Yeah. Okay. Wait lang, should ha? Hindi lang. I'm gonna stop share and then I'm going to share you a video. Gusto mong pangitaon kay. Tulo to siya kabuok. Ito siya kay. Extend ko na board siya kayo to ang klase sa OM ron. More siya on history of OM. Pinakalas nga ko history. Wait lang. So you have 3 videos: doll test, hypocritical media coverage, and racism and xenophobia. We can start first with the difference between xenophobia and racism, then we'll move towards the second video, which is hypocritical media. So I want you to listen intently to how the reporters conduct and even compare what is happening in Ukraine versus the Middle East. I want you to point out which part there sounds racist or very xenophobic, or more on racist man to siya nga kind of approach. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so try to watch this video first on what is the difference between xenophobia and racism from BBC Ideas. Okay?
The A to Z of ism.
Attention ha.
Xenophobism. Xenophobia is a term used to describe the fear and hatred of the foreign other. It is a fear that the other, the less deserving foreign. The A to Z of isms. Xenophobism. Xenophobia is a term used to describe the fear and hatred of the foreign other. It is a fear that the other, the less deserving foreigner, will take away your way of life. Xenophobia has a long history. The Romans and Greeks labeled those outside their borders as barbarians, uncivilized brutes who needed to be conquered for fears of them contaminating the empire. And xenophobia is shaping the political debate today. In the campaign for Britain to leave the EU, we were starkly warned about the threat of the hordes of foreigners supposedly swarming to the border of Fortress Britain. The Prime Minister at the time of the vote, David Cameron, ushered in Brexit in part by badly misjudging the power of xenophobia when he assumed that people would not vote themselves poorer because they don't like Poles living next door. Across the Atlantic, Donald Trump was elected on a wave of xenophobia against the imagined criminal gangs, drug dealers, and human traffickers supposedly pouring across the border with Mexico. Build the wall is the perfect slogan of our xenophobic times. But it would be wrong to confuse xenophobia with racism, though the two are often related. Racism is more than the fear of the other. It is a system of oppression based on the belief that so-called races are superior to others. Just as much of the Brexit vote was based on a desire to curb white migration into Britain, we have seen xenophobia in places like South Africa, where migrants from other African countries have been violently attacked by other black people who are themselves poor and lacking in opportunity. It is the logic of scarce resources, of the country being too full to sustain the outsider, and a reminder that you can be the victim of racism and perpetrate xenophobia. The Windrush scandal was caused by the hostile environment, a xenophobic policy aimed at squeezing out illegal immigrants by making checks of documents routine in all areas of life, including work, education, and even visiting the doctor. The unsurprising result was that many, including those who had legally come from the Caribbean post-war, lost their jobs or were deported to countries they had long left behind. But it was also the logical conclusion of decades of immigration policy that purposely restricted immigration from Britain's former colonies in the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa. The expansion of freedom of movement from Europe was a continuation of welcoming white migration whilst closing the door on people of color. Xenophobic fears are easy to stir when inequality increases. The pain the so-called natives feel through poverty and inequality are turned onto the foreigner trying to jump the queue. It is no coincidence that following the increased inequality since the 2008 financial crisis, xenophobia has been on the rise across the world. Thankfully, there is a way to tackle this trend. When society is more equal and provides for all, there is no need to fear the other.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, so that
Don't
is
forget
from
to subscribe.
BBC, no? So I took a
And
video.
click the bell to receive
from someone
notifications
that
for new videos.
has
See
an understanding on xenophobia and racism. No, I don't want to get videos from just random people in YouTube that make up. So if you find this video interesting, there are other ways that you can learn. Again, I would like to recommend TED Talks are very long, but they're full of ideas and kanang mga supplemental nga and then also TED Ed are shorter, just like this one, and they're designed in a way nga it will be more easier for you to understand different concepts because it's animated. Let's try. Okay, this one is from, what do you call this one? This one is akong nakitaan ako. Sneak attack sa reporter sa Muslim girl. Wait. Hypocritical. So now this news. Okay. How do you know if this one is kanang legit source of information? They provide full videos. So, for example, they create this compilation of short videos from different sources, if they provide resources kung asan nila nigikuha, and you can trace it and you can play the full video, then that is also kanang reliable siyang information because it provides references for you to trace back original information. This is just second-hand information. Why? Because the first-hand information are coming from the original source of these clips, like CBS News, BBC, diba? Nag-MIL na punta, no? So when you look at the description, if they provide, like, video 1 is from CBS, you can access it here. Pag-click mo sa YouTube link, it will redirect you to the full video of this one. To get the full context, then, na siya, no? Maayo, peer-reviewed, and maayo siya nga video. Okay? And then, dili siya more on opinions, like the content itself is there. Okay? But if you cannot trace the original video, like they provide short videos and splice videos without the resources, you have to look up the full video and full video jud ani individually, like manually, no? Kay man na kay kung dili nila ibutang ang resources, meaning gi-manipulate ra siya, no?
Relatively civilized.
They look like any European family.
Christians, they're white.
This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect.
Okay, I want you to really focus your attention to this video because I want you to understand in what way, no, this correspondent or kanisya nga news reporter discusses or how they cover Ukraine versus Middle East. Now again, I don't want to put news reporters in a negative light because there will always be watchdogs to me. They will provide relative information so that makabalo taon sinatabo sa lain nga lugar. But the way they deliver the words can be very racist and xenophobic. So I want you to listen carefully and try to understand which part of their, pagsulti ang very racist or unfair na coverage.
Civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
When they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they?
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
As you're talking to us, Matthew, we're playing in the latest pictures of some of the refugees trying to get on trains or trying to get out of Ukraine. And what's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
Some of the media coverage of the conflict in Ukraine has been kind of off. We have reporters and pundits making some rather awful remarks about the nature of this conflict and these refugees versus, say, conflicts and refugees in the Middle East. First off, Europe has been home to some of the worst wars and worst war crimes in human history. I mean, the Holocaust. So why this surprise that bad things are happening in Europe? And second, when they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they? The reason they seem to want us to care more about Ukraine, and we should care about Ukraine, but not because they're white Europeans. That shouldn't be the reason we care about Ukraine.
Yeah, no, that's what's so disturbing in all of this. And in fact, not only that, it's trying to make an excuse why the West should get involved and embrace these refugees and help them. Listen, let's be clear. You should encourage and actually help refugees because they are fleeing a war. I don't know if you saw this. There was a op-ed today in the Telegraph. Well, I think we have it. We'll put it up for our viewers to see. This was an op-ed in which the writer, Daniel Hannon, said that these people, the Ukrainians, they're like us. They watch Netflix. They have Instagram accounts. They read uncensored newspaper, and then goes on to say that war is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote population. Oh no, it's happening to us here in Europe. And to your point, you're absolutely correct. Europe has had some of the worst human rights abuses and atrocities and wars in not just modern history, in all of history.
Okay. So, we'll stop there first. Okay, 4 naman. Pero before tamu go, I want to ask you this. Okay, what was your take on the video that you have seen earlier? Was there a lot of hint of racism? Racist comments? Although it was so subtle, no? If ikaw minam, okay naman, may kuan ka dito, di ba ka usually when we talk about races, like muingon day ka og kanang mga very racist slurs like NIG, kabalo mo sa sunod, no? Kanang mga racist jud nga slurs or mga hapak, mga syagit. Kato they were really talking about the crisis in Ukraine, but there is still a hint of racism there. Okay? So what was your take on that video? Let me ask from Kay.
Kwanda, very racist jud kayo dam. Although presem giingon dam walay mga something ing or like nega or something, but the way they said it bitaw dam from the first reporter dam katong I forgot kinsa to yang katong first na reporter na tiguang dam ba ana siya, Europe is not a country like Afghanistan and Iran kay so dito pa lang daan dam na words very racist na kayo dam yung pasabot bitaw ang Europe na country kay dili bitaw inana may tag yang gi-compare sa Iraq bitaw Afghanistan dam na kana nga country kay kana known dyan na sa gera kanang permi dyan na mag-war ang Europe dili prang dira pa lang na words dam very racist na jud kay paminawon dam masakitan jud ang uban nga country ana dam especially maminaw taga Middle East da kato pong isa pod ka reporter dam na gakera sila sa mga taga Europe ra jud mga European people na with blue eyes, white hair or blonde people, white people inana wala sila gakare sa uban na namuyo sa Europe like katong mga syempre pag ang usa ka country mix man jud na dam no like may black people, may Asian na inana dam. So gakera sila sa people na naa sa Europe dam katurang mga blue hair o mga inana. Muna kung pinakauna na observe dam kabalo ko daghan kayo patong video na nato, pero pinaka main na ano jud dam racist kay katong gi compare nila ang Europe sa Afghanistan na ang Europe kuno dili daw kuno alagyera, dili kuno siya same inana dam. Dason thankful pud kay to gi-address so sa duha ka reporter bitaw dam na sayop ilang pag-address silang mga report bitaw dam. More na dam.
Correct. Before ko ma-ask kay Angel, I really like how Kay was able to discuss everything, no? Very good, Kay. No, you've also seen hints of racism in those video. Actually, what I like about Americans, although no, I don't want to condemn all Americans as racist, because again, natunga siya na ang Amerika sa racist o dili racist nga mga people. Naiuban nga they respect, people with different colors, they're open, they're very humanitarian. Napay uban nga very exclusive ra. Gusto sila nga sila ra jud ang superior So sagol sila. Parang kundi sa Pilipinas, sagol puta, di ba? You have different views on life, no? And people. So what I like about them is how strong and very vocal they are. Like they're not afraid to be vocal. Even gani as I'm really fond of watching foreign news compared sa ato not because nga but the way that I applaud them is because governments are not butthurt on news outlets on how they even go as to insult or throw shade sa government officials, but you don't see other people red tagging these reporters. Like they're very vocal, they're very brave to do that. I don't call it brave, but they have the freedom to actually say or to criticize the government there or to and without the fear of being red tagged. Yeah. Sa tuwa kay basta muna mahadlok ta mo criticize ako. Muna nindot kaayo to nga take class because you see reporters nga very racist. You see another set of reporter criticizing the acts of the different reporters, and they're open to say that. They're very vocal, and that's one thing that I like there. When I listen to foreign news outlets, kanaganing mga kuankas during sa election nila ni Biden and even their campaign period, like when we watch like CNN, Fox News, kanang kuan kaayo kanang gubot, lain din sila og kuan, pero they throw shade all the time, but they're okay with it, like no kuan na jud, no harm done. Sa tuwa kay we have to filter out everything before we there was even an issue before the campaign period nga there were announcements ni ang president or any government official, they had to filter out, like we don't see like the explicit content jud. So nga ta dire we sad because we don't have that kind of freedom here. But anyway, sila harapon na nga kuan kay lain man po naman po'y uban nga countries nga lahi ang ilahang way of delivering news, naiuban nga mao ni ilahang kuan, and they talk about social issues a lot of times. Okay, they invite experts to discuss more on this, like you see that one in CNN and ANC sometimes. So muna siya nindot kaayo kay at least naapoy gakuan ba naapoy ka discuss about sa ilaha pud nga pang storya. So anyway, very good discussion from Kay. You're able to get some of the points there, and then tinuod man pud kuan jud very offensive.
Tayo daw.
How about kay Angel? Sige Angel, what was your take on the video? Angel? Okay, marag napasa work si Angel, or she has internet problem. Sige lang. So, to siya, I have one last video. It's more on, it's very sad, It's a social experiment, but it's just a very simple experiment sa mga bata. Actually, it's a very old video. Siguro nakita na natin siya sa internet. For those who haven't seen it yet, it's very sad because these are not white people or these are European o Westerners man Japanese sila. Kaso, they can also be called people of color because not all Western people are white. Okay? Ano ko kay para shortcut. Ay, okay. Dili ko magkuan. Kanidi ay ito. Or an audio. Now, this one is how racism and xenophobia is so strong nga even little children, no? Automatic na ba kana ganing wala pa na sila kakuan, no? Wala pa sa kamulalong sa different social issues, pero at that young age they're fully aware on how society tells us about culture, about our physical appearance, about racism. So there's a very big effect on racism even sa mga bata class, no? And it's so sad that we live in this kind of society na even children as young as they are, they even acknowledge segregation. So it's sad, very very sad. Okay, this is Adultess, the effects of racism on children. So these are Italian children, ha? These are not African children.
Quale bambola è bianca? Quale bambola è nera? Quale delle due è bella?
Questa.
Qual è quella bella? Qual è quella brutta? E qual è quella buona? Quale è cattiva? Qual è buona? Perché è buona?
Perché ha gli occhi celesti.
Quale è cattiva? Perché è cattiva?
Perché tutto nero.
E qual è la bambola che ti somiglia di più? Quale bambola è nera?
Mi ha offeso.
Chi?
Tu.
Perché?
Perché mi hai chiamato nera.
Perché ti offendi?
Mi offendi perché altri bambini mi hanno offeso con cattiveria.
No, io non ho usato nessuna cattiveria.
Quello mi sta guardando storto.
Okay, so it's easier to break down atoms than prejudice, okay, or judgment, no? And I don't want to be kanang self-righteous because I had my fair share of prejudice in the past. I have also kunang dili jud ko totally makaingon nga maayo ko nga tao, no? And it's sad because we experience prejudice, we do these things to other people unknowingly, like unintentionally. Sad kung intentionally pa jud, no? And then sometimes you even experience prejudice ourselves, no? Dili lang kita ang mo kuan og ana nga negative action, but even kita mismo maka-feel ta na, di ba? What's sad is mas prominent siya sa people of color. Just recently no kaninang udto ang naa sa Showtime is katong Black American nga half Filipina no, and she's very loud and she's very outgoing, and first thing jud ang isulti sa kong manghod is dili siya pretty. Kung gapa siya pero ikaw kung imong perception of beauty is kanang mga puti ra, hamis og panit, straight og buhok. So, it's sad because maybe that is what society is telling us. No, mo ni siya ang standard of beauty, which is not. No, and we're very happy because even the beauty community, masking toxic man siya usahay, no, pero there are other brands that are embracing now diversity. Now, women can be beautiful no matter what they look like, color, shape, or size. Body positivity is now out there, especially Women's Month. And then, per sad lang Japon na masking no matter how much we promote for inclusivity, for multicultural awareness, there is still this strong influence of racism on how people think about other people, especially based on how they look. No, biological racism, because she's black, she's evil, siya kay puti siya ang good, no? Maging ana, 'di ba? Murag ka nang nakuan na noon. I have one book when I was in like first year of teaching, the School of Good and Evil. Bali siya, it's breaking stereotypes because the black one, the emo goth girl, studied in the School for Good. Yeah? She became like a princess and nang sa ang katong gwapa kaay nga kuan ito siya napunta sa School of Evil, and then that was like a very tiny kuan lang bang nga that's okay, that's normal, it's not a devastating thing. No, people can go out beyond the norms, beyond the stereotyping, just because nga niya naong doesn't mean nga bad siya, or just because guwapa siya or kuan doesn't mean good siya, diba? So sad kaayo, no, it has a very great effect on children. Bata pa sila dito na wala kuan dayon, no, hatag din sila prejudice nga kani siya ito man siya bad or ugly siya, kani siya puti siya, manang guwapa siya, good siya, no. Then later na realize nila, uy, parts mo din mignaong ani nga doll. So, does it mean bad pug ko? Dili man siguro, di ba? Another example is katupong nangutana ang bata ba nga. Kanang parehas rami og parehas rami og insides anang babae, tong puti nga babae, itong nga babae. Even if muskon sa panyo ang itsura sa gawas, you still all look the same on the inside. Okay, so may ana ba nang no matter, like, it's just superficial, no? Parehas sa man tatanan on the inside. We may have different thoughts or upbringing or lain man tagkuan, but we still live on the same earth, no? We breathe the same air. Mo na siya. So sad lang kayo. What was your take on the video, Daike? Hello? Wait lang siya. What was your take on the video katong doll test?
Ay, sorry na bana. Di ra madung kin bana dam.
Dili ra man Dili ra.
One, I don't know them if pampud sila sa parents nila or sa society. Ang
Yes, Daike. Medyo choppy mong audio, Day. Okay, so medyo nawala ang audio ni Kay, no?
appreciate na gulo sila na makita nila lang self sa mirror na, oh, black ko tapos ako nakitaan nga girl kay white in anak dam.
Okay.
But it's okay raman dam kanang sa galitaw kanang lain og color kanang mainana sila basta kanang dili pud sila na racist bitaw dam kay naman po'y black people dam na racist pud sa white dam.
So na po yung namangay uban gani.
O vice versa rin jud dam.
Ang importante ana is
even Asian.
Oo. Ang importante na is we don't judge a person based on how they look.
Color.
Yes. Mobito na nga, for example, if we dislike this person, it's because we find this person nga, alam ko siya batasan good, or I don't really get along with this person. Not because, ay, di ko ginahan, di ko ginahan sinaw, no? That should not be the case, no? It's okay to dislike a person, masking lahi pa ni siya og naong or lahi siya og race, because you know their personality or you find them displeasing ang ilahang kuan, but not because sa ilahang physical appearance or tungod sa kuan. Okay, may nga yung uban nga, huy, we can't say no to this person kay or dili ta pwede mo buyag kay basi niyag inon tag racist. No, may nga naka-racist kung imuha siyang i-judge masking wala siya gibuhat nga maot, imo siyang gi-judge just because of his physical appearance. Pero if he's doing something bad, regardless of his race, regardless of his color, you have the right to, paano ka na, buyagon siya, or mo palayo ka niya kay basig bad vibes siya po, no? You judge a person because how he treats others and because of his personality, not because of how he looks, no? Muna importante jud ang sa sulod, no? Sa naadira. Okay?
Yes, daw.
So, I think that's it. We will not have class na lang sa OM or na overtime ko, no? It's an hour and 30 minutes na kong na-spend and sige lang.
Mas nice na mag-OM dam. I mean, much easy siya i-understand kay very kanang ano siya sa society dam ba. Very kanang nahitabo dyan siya dam ba.
Oo. And then, kuan po, no?
Very practical. Dili siya kanang pang-study ra bitaw jud kanang for example kanang mga algebra kay layo kay sa tinuod in real life. Kani kay murag as in kung siya daily life ma-apply.
Oo. Pag una nga I'm very quite cautious in teaching this subject because daghan pa jud kaayo ta dapat i-cover. Sometimes there are things nga when I say can be kanang dili siya fully ma-justify sa concept, no? Mas medyo ganita ni anthropologist ang mo teach ninyo ani. I remember last time when we had the anthropology subject, it was more on the origin of man, pero anthropology is so much more than that, no? Anthropology also talks about culture. Ang importante na culture jud nga ma-include.
Galit ang kay nagkaroon nga kuan dam kay nagka-develop man gud ang kuan society o ang generation.
Correct. Oh. I would like to tackle more on LGBT ganita nino, but again, I'm not.
Nice pud na dam. Very kuan pud dam kanang sa galina. Very rampant pa siya. Rampant pa na ang kuan karon.
Okay, there are parts that we can support LGBT community, but there are also limitations to that. Kay dili man sa panahon nga sometimes magod they use that as their not trump card but more on maglang panagang bang you're disrespectful to the LGBT community, masking young behavior gipakita is also not respectable. So,
gali daw mapuy na. Even katong kwan dam, sorry dam ha. Katong women empowerment dam, di ba? Nagkwan man tato dam no, na discuss man tato nato dam no. Even kanang bisag daghan na kay ga-promote og women empowerment dam kanang mga like Pia Words ba kanang mga influencer na ginakwa nila or sa Facebook na motivational quotes about women empowerment, but at the end of the day gali dam kay di man gali tanan ma-apply sa atong kaugalingon, like in a real life jud ang women empowerment dam kay feeling ako dili mo pud nun tanan dam mostly kay sa social media ra like sila like it's okay to have na itom imong ilok or dagang kag pimples na dili ka kon, but in a real life na adyo mo criticize nimo like inana dam balisod kay bitaw dam kay nag-promote ra ka like na times na uban igura pud mo promote, igura pud mo share labi na sa social media tapos in person wala.
Correct. Oo.
Manglibak gyapon.
An example of that is also toxic femininity.
Yes,
an example of that is you are so feminist up to the point you hate men. Feminism is not hating men. No? Feminism is dapat patas ta. I like being in competition with men. I like men, pero dili ko ka-stand once nga ilang i-violate akong rights like sexually assault or tawag og names or i-see ko as a sexual object or i-downplay ko nga dira ra ko kutob. Okay? That's fighting for feminism. That's kanang feminist kind of approach nga I like being challenged and also competing with men. I do not hate them. What I want is a society wherein men and women patas silang duha. No, dili mag-insultuhanay kanang kanang dili nimo i-downplay ang success sa babayi. Nga na gani mo na siya dapat ang sa feminism. Nga men and women can succeed in that kind of world. Ang toxic feminism is maglagot kas tanang lalaki like tanang lalaki paris-parihas no dili na siya. That's toxic feminism na. Okay?
Galit daw.
Kanang ganing kuan gani dai kanang end the patriarchy nga kind of kuan. That's not a toxic feminist kind of approach. Mangitag end the patriarchy. Even ang babayi can have patriarchal kind of thinking. Okay, I have a friend na very babae siya ha, pero na siya patriarchal kind of thinking. Because para niya, mga lalaki ra daw kuno para angay nga, why would I concern myself nga, dapat kitang mga babae, pagwapa ra ta. Ang mga lalaki ra dapat kay sila ang mga strong, mga bright. Kana ganing downplaying women, babae siya mismo ha. Nya, very patriarchal yung way of thinking, no?
Sa in ana dam like ang puta kay bisag unsaon ni mag-educate ang tao dam na jud sila ilahang beliefs bitaw dam na pero nang kwan dam di ba karon uso na mo make move ang babae di man nung tanan I'm not saying tanan pero like na jud uban dam na uy I'm a girl ako jud dapat kunon well tinod man sa mas lahi ra man jud ang lalaki mo offer pero like kwan man gud dam I think kanang basta ka na mag-listen ko guys pero
wala na ko na tayo delikadesa mo ako na kuno dayon ni isulti
pero like naaman siya kwandam karon good na inana ba kalabi karon san una guro kay very pag feminine ka babae jud ka basin babae ra jud imong himuon maayo labi na weightlifting di ba atong masanayan to san una labi na ko puro ra lalaki mag na mga muscles na karon kay hasta pwede day babae mag-lift og bugat kaayo mag-aswat ako yung tingsan una puro ra lalaki mag-aswat og bugat kayo may mga muscle karon kay mga babae sad
that's stereotyping na no nga kanang ay dapat mo ni ang lalaki dapat mag-adjust per me ang babae tawhay kaayo no nga wherein in fact in the relationship you have to both of you must make the equal jud mong duha sa effort, diba? Dili lang puro sa lalaki mag-effort kay tungod lalaki siya. That's stereotyping na. Oo. So, ingana no, daghan pa jud mga issues nga dapat i-address kay you can even eski ang lalaki pwede man sila ma-feminist no? Like you see Sir Roy no nga he is a feminist masking lalaki siya because he supports women's right. Para niya we have healthy friendship kay dili siya wala siya fragile masculinity kana ganing he allows women to also work with him and then walay kuan ba nga ang uban man good no sila threaten sila if na ay babae nga mas mo do well in society no mga ana ba that's fragile masculinity na so muna kanang kind of thinking has to be diminished we do anything we want regardless of our gender. Kung lalaki ka, if you want to cry, if you want to be soft, pero you're still straight, dili ka bayot, and that's okay, no? The bottom line is, we are free to do anything that we want, and it doesn't have to associate with gender. Like, I'm free to ride a motorcycle, or drive a motorcycle, I'm free to do weightlifting, person na ba, no? Or kung lalaki ka, you're free to cry, you're free to be vulnerable, kung lalaki ka, you're also free to be sensitive, to like pink, pero lalaki jud ka nga lalaki. So,
kanang ba kay guilty sad ko ana daw kay kita man gud daw I don't know ha kanang di man jud kuan kanang nasanay mo pag lalaki daw strong di ba na sa mind so makakita tag lalaki maghilak-hilak na uy kauwi sad nimo uy ay sig hilak uy ka lalaki ni na bisag ako daw makaimon jud ko ana kay Murag na sa mindset daw pero like sayo pud siya like valid ta ng feelings mababay malalaki matumboy maunsa valid jud
correct so again regardless of your gender unsa ra jud imong buhaton nga gusto nimong buhaton if you want to feel what you want to feel then you do that no ko kay ako ang Europe is a mixture of both my feminine touch and masculine nga side no so you don't judge a person sa kung ano. And then, muna, more jud ang mga things nga kinahanglan nato i-address sa kani nga subject. Daghan pa actually na padira ang imperialism later on, how, other countries will adapt to Western cultures. Unsa pa gaytong uban gani? Daghan pa kay ko og i-discuss. Apil i-insert po nato diri ang sexual harassment, daghan kay mga issues nga need i-address. But still, this is important kay again, it's part in what we experience in the workplace and it's really difficult. I attended last time, ngayon ko nga magamit ako ni sa kong klase sa multicultural I attended one webinar last time. It was a very short 2 hours lang to siya, and it discusses how important as kami nga naa sa administration nga when we handle our people nga under us, even students, you have to be aware of multicultural diversity mo na siya, no? Kay lain biya tatanan, no? And lisod na mo siya pinakalisod ang intellectual quotient, dali ra kay na siya class. You read books, you enlighten yourself, no? Expose mo kaugalingon sa different learning materials. You can have this high intellectual quotient. Parang emotional quotient is very difficult to master. You don't know how to manage your feelings, you don't know how to manage your people, nga lain-lain og batasan, and sometimes it can be very chaotic. So muna, no, even though kanitong subject, dili man ako siya ma-cover jud tanan for the entire semester, but hopefully it can help us be aware in different social issues so that when we manage different people, meet different people, we can be able to understand nga because mamanggod ni siya, mampuni silang culture, kuan lang, no, kanang let's be open-minded, ngayon, etc. So muna, no, nakatabang rin siya nga kuan po. Okay, so that's it for today. Mo discuss pa ko further on racism and prejudice na pod, no. I don't know lang sa Wednesday kung makamit pa ta, siguro mahatag lang ko activity kay musit-in ko as panel member sa oral defense sa senior high. If ma-cancel, then we can proceed with our class on Wednesday. So just a continuation of what we've discussed this afternoon. So more na siya on prejudice. Similar na Japan sa racism ug xenophobia, no. Dira man na mag-root tanan ang racism sa prejudice, no, nga you judge someone immediately without getting to know the real context, no, or be sensitive about it, no. Victims po tanan kita tanan, no. Si ako dili ko magpaka self-righteous na kakuan po ko ana, no. Makabuhat po taging ana sa tong isig ka tawo po. So let's try to learn together, dili lang ako nga motudlo, ako pod makakaton po ko ani sa to ang lesson para so that we can be more open-minded and be more culturally aware. Okay? So, do you have any questions before tamo end?
Wala reda.
Okay. So, let us pray before tayo mag-end sa toong class. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. As it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Saint Rita, pray for us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, thank you so much, Kay. And hopefully see you this week or next week na lang, no, in case nga I have oral defense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.